Good morning. I am Angel from Lima in Peru. Welcome to my channel. I want to tell you that on the 8th of October, I traveled to the Chilean capital, Santiago. I went on holiday and stayed 5 days there. I stayed in an apartment in the city center, Vicuña Maquena Avenue, and also spent some hours in Valparaíso and also in Viña del Mar. I would have wanted to go to Talcahuano in the metropolitan area of Concepcion. However, I couldn't for monetary reasons and because of the itinerary. In Talcahuano, you can find this monitor, Huascar, which is the main character of this historical novel I read during the journey. Huascar, the naval hunting that marked the history of Peru and Chile. This is a historical novel by Carlos Tromben, a Chilean writer who was born in Valparaíso, and he is the editor of a financial magazine called America Economía. Well, I have the first Peruvian edition, published by Estruendomudo in July 2016. I was surprised to have read a BBC article in which it was stated that by that date, the book had already had 6 editions in Chile since it was published in 2014, which tells me a lot about how much interest it always generates on both sides of the border. In 301 pages, this book has 3 parts and an epilogue. The first part is called The Certain. There are 16 sections marked with a place and date, starting in Caldera on the 22nd of May 1879 and finishing in Valparaíso on the 20th of September. There was a kind of catastrophe announced, but nobody knew when it was going to start. In Iquique, the Esmeralda, a Chilean battleship, was sunk by the Peruvians, and Arturo Prat, the Chilean leader, died, so he immediately became a national hero. One of the central topics that I see in this novel is concerning personal interest. For example, Domingo Santamaria, who would later become the president and at that time was a minister, I think, he used that fury of the people so as to become president ultimately or eventually. More personal interest. This time courtesy of the owner of the main newspaper in Chile, El Mercurio. His name is Agustin Edwards. Because Bolivia dared to charge Chile taxes because of the saltpeter exploited on its coast, he would use his influence to portray Bolivia as a kind of traitor. Well, in Peru, Miguel Grau was a really clever hero. He had made 2 cabinets fall in Chile with half the power, the naval power that Chile possessed. In Chile, he was considered an evil enemy. Well, so there were 2 options, perhaps. Maybe the first one was to search him, to go for him in his lair in Arica, or maybe to catch him, to capture him at sea, as if the Huascar was a whale. So there was a first analogy, a first comparison with that animal on page 37. A poet, Eusebio Lillo, said that rather than strength, what was necessary was, to lie to him, to make him leave Arica and apply a kind of ambush on a group of soldiers was going to land near Iquique. So they were going to make Miguel Grau uh, intervene the Chilean communications so that he could swallow the bait and in the end he was going to be captured. Another character who was mentioned there was Rosa de Talagante, a famous singer from Valparaíso. Melchor Martinez, a Chilean, offers her a drink, and well, a kind of romance appears, which was rather surprising and also adds a lot to this novel because it just not only focuses on just the military aspect, but also the personal one. Other aspects, for example, is the one about Captain La Torre, another Chilean whose brothers and father were Peruvian. You can imagine that kind of dilemma. This is not the only case, of course. And also in this chapter, there is a brilliant description of Valparaiso, the city and the port, so dynamic and cosmopolitan. The United Kingdom supported Chile because Peru dared to charge this country, United Kingdom, taxes for guano and saltpeter. The second part is called the Encounter. It starts in Sarco on the 4th of October 1879 and ends in Valparaiso on the 8th of October, some hours before the naval battle. So, well, the Huascar had or was rather than famous, infamous amongst the Chileans. So, a character that made me laugh at times was Eusebio Lillo, because he was not a soldier, he was not a military man, he was a civil one in a place that belonged to sailors. So the only thing that prevented him from being laughed or ridiculed was the fact that he wrote the verses of the national anthem of Chile. Well, and I remembered, thanks to this chapter, the names of the 6 battleships that captured and partially destroyed the Huáscar. Cochrane, Blanco Encalada, O'Higgins, Covadonga, Loa, and Matias Cousinho. So the bait was the rumor that the Chileans were going to land in Tarapacá. I really like that kind of analogy, that each singer, okay, knew his or her own part. There was only one character left so that the opera was complete and could end. Who was this character? Miguel Grau. That is on page 110. Chile had a civil government. It was a kind of more serious republic, and this is something that Miguel Grau wished Peru had, but Peru didn't. Peru was ruled by many leaders, what in Spanish we say cacique. No? Well, there is also a kind of flashback. When Grau was a child, he met the old sailor man, Ismail, from Manhattan, and he told him, among other things, something very, very important, that one must never kill an albatross. So there is a kind of, mystical aspect that adds beauty to this novel, that kind of superstition. Also the fact that many black black soldiers are mentioned here: Atanasio Cayolera, Faustino Tolas, Apolinario Galeano, Quiterio Gallardo, and others like the more famous cabin boy or cabin man Medina. Grau captures a neutral ship, and he communicates in English with the captain Ramson, who reaffirms the private interest of Edwards, commercial interests. A task that he had was to portray the other, obviously in a negative way. Right? There was a kind of war played by the press in each country, because Edwards showed the miseries and contradictions of Peru, and El Comercio, the most important Peruvian newspaper, did the same when referring to Chile. And well, debate was in a form of a telegram. Another aspect that I really like was some reference to an evil spirit at the bottom of the sea, David Jones. What happened at the end of this chapter? A Peruvian soldier killed an albatross. So just by reading that, you might also know who was going to be the winner and who was going to be the loser. And it happened in the third part, the combat, the battle, which started in Punta Angamos on the 8th of October 1879 at 7:30 a.m. and it ends in Santiago 3 years later. 2 years later, sorry, on the 18th of September 1881. So blood, shouting, horrible injuries. The Huascar, alone against 6 battleships, much better equipped than it, being destroyed here, being destroyed there. Then national flag. Um, maybe in tears, right? A kind of man's laughter. And, one leader that succeeded the other, Grau, Aguirre, Rodriguez, and, Samuel McMahon, a foreigner, I think he was English, who fought for the Peruvians, had to wait more time to meet Davy Jones. He wanted to kill and die, but he couldn't. Many prisoners, and the information arrives Chile. Celebration in Valparaiso, Santiago celebrates. They have finally, okay, at last hunted the great whale called Huascar. The news also arrived Lima. However, they arrived in Lima. However, the effect was the total opposite. Right? In the epilogue, it was about the prisoners, okay, the life they led in Chile, the dignity they were treated with, and the Huascar included. Okay, what changes was in Chilean politics, also the love story between Melchor and Rosa. They meet again, how or what the occupied city of Lima looks like. And there are so many characters. I counted more than 30, I think. And I learned many things. One of the reasons I really liked this novel was because it taught me about the telegraph and its nature, the different messages, even with some biblical references, the Morse alphabet, something that I, of course, ignore everything about. Right? Carlos Tromben has done it successfully. Also, the human dimension, romance, illusion, even domestic violence in that setting, right? So sometimes we believe that people are just hating and dying and crying. However, isn't there space for those aspects, for romance? The fratricidal war, in the case of La Torre, for example, and you know that many people had relatives, business partners, friends on both sides of the border, of the frontier. So the author tells us that this novel, this historical novel, is a kind of homage for the many Peruvians and Chileans who offered their lives for the honor of their countries during the War of the Pacific. He says that in three words: they are legend. So I really recommend reading Huascar. It took me a long time to do so, but I cannot regret at all. Well, that's all. Goodbye.